And we are live. Welcome back to another episode of The Jaylee Show. Each week we sit down with business owners and leaders and influencers from all around the world and talk about different marketing and sales and whatever else comes to mind. This week we have the mighty John Espirian. We were talking beforehand, you're the author of Content DNA, also known LinkedIn nerd. So let's talk about that first. Let's talk about your book. What is Content DNA? What's it about?
Content DNA is something I've been working on for the past 2 years, and it was inspired by the business clients who come to me for writing services, because I'm a copywriter, and very often they come to me and think that they're going to go and buy words for their website, words for their articles, and I always kind of stop them in their tracks and say, well, hang on, what about what's the DNA of your business? What's your brand identity? What are we trying to really put out into the world? And very often I found that those people have either not thought about that question properly, or they've done some kind of cosmetic exercise where they've ended up with a glossy PDF that they can then file away on on some drive somewhere and say, we've done that, we've done branding, it's done.
It's got a mission statement in it.
We've even had a weekend away thinking about it. But they don't actually then go and live those brand values. They don't actually put it into the way they create their content, the way they treat their people, how they hire staff, how they deal with customers. And I was kind of saying to people that if you go and create content that isn't in service of what your true identity is, people are going to see the joins. They're going to say, well, hang on, you're trying to be this caring company, but actually you pay your people less than minimum wage or something. Or, you're just jumping on a bandwagon and saying, supporting what's cool today. It's not in service of what your brand identity really is. So I just thought I'd write my thoughts about this down. And so I came up with Content DNA. It's this idea of creating a recognizable shape for your business that's based on about 4 or 5 core brand values that are true to you in every circumstance, and then making sure that those values come out in everything that you create, so that people start to recognize, that's John talking, and that's Jay talking, and I understand what he's getting at, and I always know what to expect from that person. And given enough repetition, so you need a kind of long-term approach to this, that's the way that you start to become known, remembered, and eventually trusted in your industry. So that's the whole idea behind Content DNA.
Well, and I think it's great because it's what we kind of all need to do to differentiate ourselves between everyone else. Otherwise, it's just another mission statement. It's just another tick in the box. And I saw a post recently about, our mission statement's important, and they put up the top 6 or the top 8 companies on the planet and their mission statement, and you just wouldn't know.
Differentiate. That's it. That's it.
So is it just an exercise in marketing people ticking marketing boxes, or are you getting down to the nitty gritty of why are you different? Because there's always Pepsi. If you're Coca-Cola, there's always an alternative option out there. Yeah. So the only way to get yourself across is actually be yourselves, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And another key idea that led to the creation of this book is that for a while I had a pretty boring kind of brand identity that no one would echo back to me. And then I was speaking at a conference once with my marketing mentor, Mark Schaefer, who actually wrote the foreword for this book. And he asked me a question. It wasn't a scripted question. We'd agreed some of the questions. He asked me an unscripted one right at the end. We were just about to leave the stage, and he said, John, how are you going to remain relevant in a market full of lots of options? I thought, blimey, how am I going to answer that? And then without even thinking, really, I just came out and said, I'm going to create relentlessly helpful content. So I just said it. This was being videoed. I went back and reflected on that afterwards. And that idea of being relentlessly helpful just kind of summarized me really well, I felt. And I started using it in my marketing. And all of a sudden, something amazing happened. People started saying it back to me.
Nice.
It was like a call and response. I say it, they would repeat it. And that had never happened before. But that coincided with me starting to become known in my industry as being this really relentlessly helpful guy. And I kind of thought, well, I came across this by complete chance. I mean, it was just a chance incident.
Sure.
Other people shouldn't need to rely on some kind of moment of divine inspiration for that kind of thing to happen to them.
Sure.
There must be a structured way of thinking about your brand values and coming up with something that you can build a brand identity around. So those were the beginnings of the book. And in there, I talk about the methods that you can use to try and come up with your own brand identity, and then how to create content that speaks truth to those things and sticking at it for long enough so that you can actually make an impression on people. Because that's the other big thing that clients get wrong, is that they'll come in with all guns blazing. They'll say, yeah, we want 6 blog posts and we really want to go for it now. We want to put our mission statement out into the world and all this.
Yeah.
And then at the end of that, they just assume that they're going to be number one on Google and, rainbows and unicorns, everything's going to be good. And inevitably, it doesn't work like that. And so they're thinking, well, this is all a waste of time. Let's just go back to placing some Google ads, shall we? And that's
the ROI.
Yeah.
We know that has our ROI, right?
It's just, this is not
how long? How long is long enough then? How long do people have to wait for content to work?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because Mark Schaefer, who interviewed me for his book, Known, he interviewed another 100 people. About 70 of their case studies appeared in his book. And he found that on average, of all of those people who'd become known in their industries, all sorts of different things, the average length of time was 2.5 years. So
Really?
30 months.
Wow.
So if you tell people that you actually need to invest in this idea of creating content and creating a recognizable shape for 30 months, that completely changes the conversation, doesn't it? You can't get there with 6 blog posts. It's just not going to happen. Or 10 YouTube videos. It's not going to work. You've got to turn up relentlessly and just keep bashing the same thing. And it's much easier to do that if you're going to try to be known only in one space. So another big mistake that I made was, okay, I'll set up a Twitter account and I'll set up a Facebook account and I'll set up an Instagram. But as a solo business owner, there's just no chance of being able to dominate on those platforms.
And there's just too much, right? There's just too many. Just to be successful on one platform, and it's an awful lot of work just to understand the algorithms, understand the nuances of the platform, trying to do it across everyone does it as well. I do suggest that people should go out and grab the handles. Sure, go and set up a Facebook page.
Definitely.
Just so you've got them, and if you do have the opportunity to grow your team, or if you have the opportunity to whatever. But I can't agree more. Focus on one platform.
So this is exactly what I decided to do. I thought, let me buy into this idea. And since I work mostly in B2B, I thought, okay, well, where's the place where I'm most likely to get into B2B conversations and find B2B leads? That's going to be LinkedIn. So I'm going to try and essentially ignore everything else, and I'm going to go narrow and deep on LinkedIn. And that's what I did at the start of 2017. So it's been about, getting on for 4 years, actually. It's been 3.5 years since then. And because of that, I've become known on that one platform for being this relentlessly helpful guy who shares tips about writing and about LinkedIn itself. And that's brought me business success. Whereas if I'd split that time between Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, it would not have worked the same way as it is working now.
Absolutely. And it's about the longevity. The thing is marketing's always been about consistency, content marketing, and actually putting a message out like this, because in my opinion, because we're bombarded by everyone's message. I need to see a number of different videos which give me the same feeling before I start to even consider to have my idea change. This is just another person selling me stuff. Yeah. And one of the things I really like about LinkedIn, everyone is selling you something. Everyone's on there selling something. We're all on there for business, in one way or another. Yep. So what are the benefits then? If we're looking at each other and saying it's a 30-month campaign I've got to do now, I've got to do a 30-month content investment. Yep. What are the benefits in the short term? Because I know there are many, but what do you see?
Well, it's difficult to say that a short-term benefit for content creation is better than ads, let's say. If you're really, really small and you've got absolutely no visibility whatsoever, then I think actually placing ads is probably a very good idea, because you get an early boost, an early bit of momentum from it. Yeah. If you're at the other end of the spectrum and you're a global giant, placing ads is also smart. If you're McDonald's or Coca-Cola, that is also smart because it kind of solidifies you as the trusted voice, that the group that is not going to get superseded. You will just try and gradually grab ever more market share, and people have no chance of forgetting about you. You will always stay relevant. It's for everyone else in the middle that creating content is actually the cheapest long-term way. And there's all sorts of studies that show that a long-term content marketing approach will get you leads at a cheaper rate per client. And so it makes financial sense from that. And also you need to remember that when you create content, it works for you 24/7. So regardless of where your audience is around the world, they can consume your stuff straight away and around the clock. And it speaks to your customers in the future. So if you place an ad today and you turn the tap off tomorrow, then all of your potential future clients are never going to see that ad because it's gone. It's out of the inventory. Whereas if you create content, you're creating a footprint that can be seen months and years in the future. Right. And so it's a long. So I talk about it in the book as though it's an asset versus a cost. So ads are a cost, but content is an asset that can work for you. And I find clients who say, I read this blog that you wrote 18 months ago, and well, brilliant. But if that was an ad, they have no chance of seeing that.
Or it would have cost you a fortune if you've had an ad running for the last 18 months on any platform. You would have spent, you could have bought a house somewhere by now.
That's right. And the other thing to remember as well is when you're placing ads, is we've got no control about how much ads might cost in the future because, Facebook's already, let's say, a pay-to-play platform. And so in the future, if there's going to be ever more competition to get those slots, they can jack up the price. And all you can do is just keep paying them because once you're already sold to that idea, or you're totally their slave. Then you've got to keep paying them whatever they want to charge you. So it's a difficult thing to do. Whereas if you can be in charge of your own little slice of the internet, you set the rules, and then you do the market. You do the hard effort to get people to read your stuff, and you build an audience of people who want to spread the word about you. That's really the smart way of doing it, I think.
But I think what you're saying is so smart as well. It's an asset. Having that collateral out there is an asset. And I've had the same thing. I've had people come back and be like, "Oh, I love that video you released recently." Yeah. And I'm like, "Great, which one?" I release one every other week or so. And they'll mention a video we've released 18 months ago, and they've seen it on a different platform. We are of the size now where we can have all the platforms working all the time and have people dedicated to one in particular. And it's great because I kind of get that come through and be like, cool, where'd you see that? Instagram. Did you really? Because we released that bad boy, God knows how long ago, on LinkedIn or something. Yeah. But also that's the point as well. If you start small and start creating content on one platform, when it comes to developing, say, an Instagram account, if you've got LinkedIn, you start developing an Instagram account, just as an example, you actually have this wealth of content, and it's already been seen, only by people on LinkedIn and only the people who saw it. So, you can actually really reutilize that content, split it down again, and you've got a whole load of stuff which have worked. I remember on LinkedIn, actually, people really like this post, so I know I'm going to post that at the same time or use the same copy or something like that. To actually populate your new social media platform.
It's another thing I talk about in the book, actually, is that having creative ideas is hard. So once you've had the creative work of making something, you squeeze every ounce out of it. So repurposing and republishing is a really smart thing, and that's why video, I think, is so powerful, because if you start with your source content being a video, you can turn that into an audio production for a podcast. You can turn it into a chat transcript for a blog. You can make little snippets of it for social media, Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever size video you want to cut it. Sure. It's a brilliant source because it's so flexible. It leads to so many potential outputs, and yet you've done the creative endeavor only once, and then you can get essentially everything else then becomes admin. You can go, right, can we turn this into text? Yes. okay, someone can do that for me. I don't need to sit there and do that.
Sure.
And it's just a brilliant way of making your creative work spread further through all of your networks.
And what's smart about using that model is the thing I hear most from business owners or business leaders, whatever, people in business, is that there's time. I don't have the time. I don't have the time to be a YouTube star, Jay. And I'm like, I don't want you to be a YouTube star. I don't have time to be a podcaster. And I'm like, do you have time to do an hour's meeting once every other week? Because if not, then you're maxed and you need help. And maybe you don't want to market yourself right now if you're that maxed. But if you have the ability to do that, the hard bit, as you say, the really, really difficult bit is to come up with those ideas and be able to sit down and say, cool, we've got an hour. Like, here's a behind the scenes. I've made it really easy for myself. I just get great people on, right? It's a real simple model that we put together, right? I shut up occasionally and someone else does some good bits and pieces and we do the same thing. We walk away with an audiogram and a podcast and a YouTube channel and YouTube promos and quote squares and things, which means I can look, in fact, we were doing it this morning, I can look at our marketing plan and say, okay, cool, so that's March. Someone said that today. I was like, okay, so that's been released in March then. Like, oh, wow. That's so awesome, because it means that we can be consistent and continuous. We can see what works and say, okay, we're going to carry on that. And also then when you have that sort of level of content being released, you can start to be flexible and add in pertinent stuff as well. It doesn't all have to feel like it's something you recorded in 95 and you're releasing now. But, you actually have that basis of stuff going out, so you've got a chance to react to something that's happening in the industry or something that's happening like pertinent is right now.
Yeah, it gives you that background presence, doesn't it? Because it means that you're always in the conversation. It's one of the things, again, I mentioned in the book, is that it's really good to have a clear visual identity, because even for people who are scrolling social media at breakneck speed, if they see a certain consistent color scheme and always the same font, same logo placement and stuff, even if those people don't stop to read your stuff or watch your video, if it's presented in a congruent fashion, mentally it might even be subconscious. They're saying, John is still here, John is still relevant, he's saying something. It just reminds them that you exist. And so when the time comes that they need someone in your industry, you've got just that competitive edge to say you mind. And so even though I'm a writer, I understand the power of video to get your personality across, and I understand the power of congruence in terms of your visuals as well as the writing. And that's why whenever you see me on video, I'm always going to be wearing the cartoon shirt. I'm always going to be having the cartoon mug. That is, I want to reinforce that's me. That's part of my brand identity, and you're always going to get that from me. And it means that it's easier to remind yourself of who I am.
Yeah, and that's being joined by a fly, and that's so important as well, just to allow people to see it and know what that is. Like, we've even gone to the steps of saying certain content is in certain kind of flavors for different people, just so then when you have someone actually on your platform and you're scrolling through, you can be like, oh, okay, that's that series I like, and that's that pink color, or that's that thing I like, and that's in a different color, which is always a good idea. So as a writer, when someone's giving you video, is that an easier medium to then take and then write article about? Or, because I find it very hard to sit down with a blank piece of paper. It's the scariest thing in the world for me.
Yeah. Well, when I'm writing for B2B clients, what I do is I just hop on a Zoom call with them, because these days I don't meet clients face to face anymore. It's just not a thing now. So I'll just hop on a half-hour Zoom call with them, with one of their subject matter experts, and I will say, tell me about all of the benefits, all of the good things about this business, and then try and ask them as many difficult questions as I can. I say to them that I'm going to try to be an intelligent ignoramus, by which I mean, okay, I'll ask you smart questions, but I don't know anything about your business. I'm just going to imagine that I'm a potential customer. Maybe I need your service, maybe I don't. If I do need it, what are the kind of things I'm going to ask about? What are the problems with this service? How much is this thing going to cost me? What things would you say to a client that are obvious to you that I could tease out of you to put into this content? And very often it's always the stuff that comes out in the last couple of minutes of an interview, where they'll say, recently where I was talking to a guy, and right at the end they said, oh, well, we fitted out the London Underground and we did it in an overnight delivery. I was like, how did you not mention this before? That's like, let's lead with that, So I just do it through interview. That's the best way for me to get content.
And that's gold. That's the gold, right?
Gold, yeah. It's always the gold that comes out when people relax and just get into it.
I always call it the Columbo. It's the one more. It's just one more thing. Just as you're walking out the door when everyone's putting their jackets on, and they're like, "Oh, you should speak to Johnny.
Yeah.
Speak to Johnny. Johnny's got all the video for you." It's like, great. We just spoke for an hour and a half about how you have nothing, but Johnny has video. Oh, Johnny's got all the video in the world. I'm like,
yeah.
Right, great. I think it's so important. I think, unfortunately, there's a lot of marketing gurus and ninjas and Jedis and out there who don't go to that depths. It's all a little bit cookie cutter. It's all a little bit like, you're finance, so you talk about this, right? You want to talk about VAT and this and that. And yes, there is an element to that, but actually what's important is to speak to those, speak to the SMEs, speak to the subject matter experts and find out why they're different. Why is their offering different? Same thing if you're doing it yourself. You know it. You've definitely said it. Like you've said it 100 times, but sometimes it's really hard just to like put that out there and put it down about yourself.
Yeah. It's one of the tips I give my clients is that I tell them that we want to try and make analogies with things that are relatable in the real world, because a lot of B2B content is often for industries that are not everyday names. They're not things that people know intuitively. Like if I told you that so and so was a plumber, that's it. All I need to tell you is he's a plumber. I don't need to tell you anything else. Whereas if I tell you that a real client is a video on demand IT training for people who are looking to upskill in software licensing.
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
Right. So that's all complex. But if I then said to you, well, these guys offer training that is like Netflix, but for IT professionals.
All right, I'm back in.
Immediately you go, okay, I know what Netflix is. I get it. So explaining by analogy makes things a lot more relatable and means that mental jumps become a lot shorter because you can just understand it more quickly. And this is the essence of technical writing, is making people understand complex stuff so that they don't feel stupid and it's nice and simple. And that's essentially what I do for people. And that kind of content actually works. When people are brave enough to keep things simple on LinkedIn, especially, there's long been perceived this idea that, well, first of all, that LinkedIn isn't a content platform. It absolutely is a content platform, but that if you post there, you've got to be super professional. You've got to be suit and tie. You've got to use all the big words and the fancy phrases because we're at work now and we're professional and aren't we clever? And real humans don't work like that. And that people will not complain if you make your stuff really simple and accessible. And so that's the pathway to getting your content, I think, seen and trusted, actually. And in fact, there's experimental, data to back up that if you simplify your language, you increase the levels of trust that people have in you. And I've got some examples in the book, which is focused. This bit is focused on politics, where you compare the Trump campaign with the Hillary Clinton campaign. The complexity of the language used, and the simpler language always wins. And it's the same. Obama versus McCain, Brexit, Leave versus Remain. If you look at the complexity of the language, the simpler stuff gets people to do things because they trust that message. People would not want to admit it, but that's actually the way that people behave. So simplicity works.
It truly is, and it takes me back thinking about a sales training that I did many, many years ago called Sandler Sales Training. And one of the things that they have is barbecue speak. So we all know we've got the elevator pitch. Yeah. Right? You've got the elevator pitch. Give me your 20-second when you're in there with Richard Branson. What is your 20-second? This is our business. Go, 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 go. I hate that because I've never heard anyone say it where I'm like, cool, I don't know what you do by the end of 20 seconds. Whereas barbecue speak is how you tell your mates. That's what you do at the moment, Jay. Making videos and podcasting and stuff. Or podcasting, and it's if when you explain it to people like that, they can not only understand it, but then they can ask the more in-depth question as and when it makes sense, as opposed to you just dumping knowledge on people and hoping that's going to be exciting.
Yeah, I mean, for the longest time, probably the top copywriting tip that I give people is that when you write content, you should always read it out loud before you publish it, okay? Or if you're lazy like me, you get your Mac to speak it to you. You can, I do that, right? But the point is that makes it sound, you can see whether the content sounds natural. Does it sound like something I would actually say to another actual human being? And if it doesn't, you cannot publish that. It has to sound like you, otherwise it's inauthentic. We all talk about authenticity, but then if we press keys on the keyboard that make us sound different to the way we do on a video or in person, how are we being authentic? We're not, are we? It's got to sound like you. And that inevitably means that our writing becomes less formal, which a lot of people are scared about. But actually, if you look at the stats, keeping it simple, keeping it more informal actually leads to more business. People will trust you more and they'll go, he's all right. I'll buy from him, or I'll get to know him. He's all right. That's what happens.
I was talking to a company who are doing like cloud accounting.
Yep.
And they were saying one of the biggest things that they come up against, exactly what you're saying, biggest thing you come up against is that people think of accountant, I want it to be, Janine. I know Janine, she's done this for years. She's just around the corner. I give her all my books. I go, here you go, Janine. I can see she's in a real building and everything. And that's cool. But it's such a kind of antiquated way of working, which isn't necessary anymore. And is there a better option from a company that are working now? All tax is digital anyway. We're all, everyone's got their books in a digital format. Isn't that much better? But how do you get past? And they were asking me a question: how do you get past the barrier people have? And I'm like, nowhere that I can see you being yourselves. You have to be yourself. What does Janine have over you right now is that I get to look her in the eye and be like, hey, you're not going to screw me, right? You're not going to take my money, right? And I need to do the same thing, even if it's a cloud accountant. And if anything, the last 4 or 5 months has shown us is the fact that we can have really good, relatively intimate conversations and relationships all held over video.
Yep, absolutely. So again, we need to be the same shape everywhere. So if I'm talking to you on video, or if I'm meeting you in person, or if I'm writing a blog that's for you, or an email that's for you, it all needs to tie in and make sense. Because if it doesn't, these days, especially with younger people, they're going to go, well, which version is the real you? How is this making sense? So it's really important to be the same shape every time. Really.
It's also one of the reasons I say to people hit record, which is a Joseph Gordon-Levitt concept and company and idea. But it's also just so true as just an idea you should use, because we didn't do any production on the videos I released for a year, and we're a production company. We're a content creation company. But the whole idea that I did for that first year of just releasing videos was, look, this is how easy it is. It's me and I'm shaking it around. It's not on a tripod. It's no lighting. There's no nothing. Sometimes I'm falling over, whatever. But it was just, here is content. And even from doing something as simple as that, people were coming back just from releasing those videos. Our long-term clients are saying, can we still afford you? I was like, yeah, why? Why? What have you heard? And the only difference is that, I was spending 20 minutes a week to release a 2-minute video. In worst case scenario, if I've really eaten it and had to do it 10 times, and it was one shot, there was no edit, I did it all on my phone and released it just as a way of doing it. And the benefits, like we were saying earlier, we didn't see, you don't see success straight away. It doesn't happen in 3 months. It doesn't happen in 6 months. But what you start to see is recognition just happen from, and it's one of those things. You go to a networking event and talk to people and they're like, hey, I love your video. I like your video.
It's great to hear that, isn't it?
It is, but I'm always like, you know what? If you like it, like it. Hit like, man. Don't tell me now. Jeez.
Yeah, sure.
I
Well,
saw this video 2 months ago.
that reminds me of something else that I talk about, which is that this idea of a consumer contributor creator model. And
Right.
for a long time, stats suggest that about 90% of any online user community is going to be in the consumer group. That means that they just watch.
Really?
That's it. And if they do take any actions, those actions are completely dark to you. In other words, they might watch you and go, well, Jay's really good. I might tell some mates about him down the pub, but you
Right.
won't ever know that those mates then go on to tell other mates who then become your customers, right?
Right.
So those consumers make up the majority of any online user community, and therefore, when you think that you've got no audience because no one's hitting the like button or the comment button, actually you do. They are paying attention, and they would notice if you disappeared. So you still got an audience.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
But if you actually want to really, really stand out, you've got to be a contributor or you've got to be a creator. So someone who comments or likes is a contributor and shares. A creator is only 1% of the user community. They're the people that create the videos, that make the blogs, and the consistent creators are the ones who eventually will hoover up all of the traffic because they're the ones who people will remember.
What I love about that is when you talk to people and it's like, God, they're releasing another video, huh? And I'm like, I know. And again, and again. And you hate them, but you haven't unfollowed them, right? You haven't unfollowed them, you're still watching them. And it's amazing how that level of perception goes, And what frustrates me so much is that most business leaders, like I say, anyone in business will get the fact of like going to a networking meeting is a good idea. Going to an exhibition, stand there. Now I've been on 1,000 exhibition stands. Nah, probably not. I've been on hundreds of exhibition stands, and I don't know. Have we got any business from them? Maybe a couple. And maybe a couple of like direct leads, but there's still this feeling that an exhibition stand brings business in. That brings in business. And why? Because you put yourself in front of eyes. Whereas the concept of, say, putting the same amount of money into, and it doesn't have to be video. If you hate video, you don't have to go on video. You can have great content written. You can have like brilliant content written, which says, talks about yourself, and that can have huge success. But it's the fact that businesses seem to find it hard to understand that the video is the same thing but significantly cheaper. It always blows me away because something like this, it's low cost. We get to have this conversation. We get to walk away with tons of pieces of content for both of us. We both get exposure from it. And it's the sake of spending an hour and hopefully trying to inform people.
A potential audience as well. I mean, if you're trying to impress 500 people at a business expo, great. What about trying to impress 700 million people on the organic reach? I mean, come on.
It's a big expo.
It is a big expo. It's a massive networking room where everyone is there to do business in some form, shape or other. It's not just a hobby for people. And so even if a tiny fraction of 1% of those people were to see your stuff, you've got leads. And that's just the low cost way of doing it these days, I think.
But unlike an exhibition, it stays there. Like we were saying earlier, any kind of advertisement, any time that you're paying for the pleasure to be in a space, it is only for a short amount of time, right? And because it's only that short amount of time, it has to then finish. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to sell it. No one's selling your face on Mount Rushmore anymore, right? No. But if you can spend the same money and have it where it's a case of people look and see a video you did 18 months ago or some copy that you did 18 months ago, then and still has the same impact that it did that time ago, but at the same point you've got a huge wealth of other content on top. Kind of win-win, right?
It's brilliant for people doing their due diligence on you because they can come back and see your content and they can dive deep and they can be really educated customers. So Marcus Sheridan, another legend of content marketing, he had this swimming pool installation company. That's a big purchase, and he started creating content feverishly, and then eventually got to the point where he was looking at his statistics and he found that the average customer was reading more than 100 of his blogs. The average customer was reading more than 100 of his blogs before contacting him.
Wow.
Imagine how educated those people are. They're just waiting to sign on the dotted line because they know every single thing about swimming pool installation that you could possibly know because he's covered the whole lot. Whereas if he just advertising, there's just absolutely no way they could have been that educated, and they would have been asking stupid questions and wasting loads of his time and then maybe not completing anyway. So educating people through content and giving people something that they can dip into and just really get educated on is just fantastic.
Exactly, and the fact it has longevity, and there's always something to be learned. Listen, John, we always try and keep these just around 30 minutes because it is LinkedIn, and people are working, and we want to try and fit it in people's working day. So obviously, I've followed you for a while, but if people want to go out there and find you, where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, LinkedIn or my website is best, and because I've got an unusual surname, if you just search for Espirian, you'll find both my LinkedIn presence and my website, and I'm full of writing tips and LinkedIn tips. So come along and follow me. If you want to connect, please personalize your invitation and say that you saw me on the Daily Show. I would really appreciate it because I get loads of invitations and most of them have got nothing in them. So that puts a bit of a burden on me. But yeah, LinkedIn and my website, those are the places to find me.
Amazing. John, thanks so much for your time.